What's going on, guys? I'm sitting here in Standard. Scourge League is over. Krangle Daddy is in its final form. And I'm here to tell you that I would not play this build in 3.17. That's the TLDR. If that's all you need to know, you can take off, start looking up other builds to play as your starter. If you would like to know a little bit more about my experience with the character in about 3 months of playing for 6 hours plus a day, if you want to know why I made some of the choices that I made, why I'm not going to play it in the next week, then stick around and we'll go over all that. Alright, let's start with a little story time about the Krangle Daddy. I wanted to play Fireball, I think mostly just because I had seen lots of people playing crazy Fireball builds, Wall Fireball, etc. back in the day when I was a newer player and did not have access to really cool gear or high levels of currency or game knowledge or any of that stuff. It looked cool, the explosions were big, I wanted to play it. And when they buffed Ignite, I decided that, I was just going to try it. And the leveling process itself was, as I said in the guide video, brutal. It was awful. And I had a buddy that I was leveling with, so I was in a party the whole time. Had I had to do it alone, I think it would have been even worse. And when we pushed through the initial leveling process and actually got into maps, I acquired a Searing Touch staff for relatively cheap and got very lucky 6-linking it. And then I Krangled it and got lucky on that as well. I also had, during the leveling process, towards the end of it, a ring Krangled with Frenzy Charge on kill, which was a huge deal for the initial jump into maps. And of course, none of that's going to be available to you in 3.17. But the point I'm making is that I had a buddy, I got really lucky with some of the drops, I did get enough currency during my leveling process that it wasn't too much of an issue to acquire the Searing Touch staff that got me going into maps, and it still just wasn't very good. It wasn't that fast, it wasn't very impressive, and there was a lull of probably 3 weeks where I was kind of just stuck. I had to pay for carries to get my Uncharted Realms finished. I basically couldn't do any bossing. I tried all kinds of different chest pieces. I tried different setups for defenses. I tried saying fuck defense altogether and full glass cannon mode. None of that stuff worked. It wasn't until probably week 7 of the league, week 6 maybe, when I really started theory crafting on my own and spending several hours a day not playing the game, but instead working in Path of Building, buying expensive gear just to test it, all of that stuff. It was only then that I sort of figured out my own way to make it into a hybrid style character and get it to where I could clear maps really fast. And I was able to leverage that into making a lot of currency. I had a mirror drop. I've had probably a total net gain of 600 or 700 Exalt throughout the course of the league. And it's pretty stupid, I think, to try and estimate the value of the gear at this point. But some of this stuff is just not going to be accessible, especially if the build is meta, in the sense that there's no way you're getting your hands on a ring like this on week 5 or 6 of the league for 1x like I did. I don't think that's going to happen to you. If you think you can get your hands on stuff like this for 1x, 2x, more than a couple weeks into the league, I mean, good luck. Helmet, for example, I never found another one like this. I was trying to upgrade this item from probably week 5 until the end of the league, and you can get helmets that are better, but not with the enchant. Or you might find one that has the enchant, but it's not going to have enough of the resist or whatever, and you're thinking, well, maybe I can make it up somewhere else. That's the problem with the build. Every piece of gear is extremely specific. I mean, if we go in here on the tree and we just look at some of my jewels, you have to have silence immunity. That's not an option. You have to have corrupted blood immunity, which I have on this. Normally I have that in my belt, but since I'm using a headhunter now, I threw it in here. On my cluster jewels, I had to get extra stats, strength, dex, stuff like that, and we're talking like the margin of error here is like 1 point. So if I take out any of these jewels, I'm gonna have to change up something else. There's every single point of stat matters, every point of resist matters, every implicit on a jewel matters. It's a gigantic pain in the ass. And the result of that is that I ended up with a character that in League, I estimate the value of the current equipped gear at, I don't know, maybe 250, 300x. And it's struggling to put out like 5 or 6 million DPS. It's not good. And so basically, if you want to play a build that can destroy maps and you don't give a shit how much it costs or how hard it is to get the stuff, then maybe it's for you. But setting aside my own experience, I want to give you 3 reasons that I think you should reconsider if you're currently considering playing Fireball. So the first one is 6 links, absolutely mandatory. If you're not going to be able to get a 6 link until later in the league because they're too expensive or you have bad luck with your fusings, whatever, you need a 6 link chest, you need a 6 link staff. The chest needs to be a unique chest. Staff is a unique staff. Martyr of Innocence is your end game goal, at least currently. Obviously now, if you could get the new staff that came out, maybe there's some shenanigans with that would make the build crazy, but I'm not going to be able to get one of those probably, and neither are you. And so the problem is that you're not going to get 6 links. That's point number 1. Point number 2 is they really only buffed the base damage of the skill. You still have to scale it, and the scaling was not there. I couldn't find it. And they nerfed Ignite to some degree. And so you're getting more hit damage, but probably less Ignite. And frankly, I was already doing some kind of hipster shit and trying to make the build work as, scaling more of the hit damage as opposed to just scaling the Ignite, which was the standard of people that were also playing the build. And it's still not that good. You could quadruple the initial damage that I'm doing, particularly on bosses, and I still don't think it's going to compare to other builds that were farming bosses by week 2. And so the final point that I would make then is that even if you're okay with, I'm going to be able to get my 6 links, I don't have any problem doing that, you don't give a shit about the potential sort of balancing out of they gave you a little bit more hit, they took away some of your Ignite, whatever, you don't care about that, you're good to go. You're still going to have the problem that at the end of the day, you're self-casting. And after probably 400 plus hours of play in this league, the mechanics just aren't there. You have to stand in place to cast, and you just don't have the survivability. I could not find a way to do any of the shit that I see people doing in other builds with 30k armor and 20k evasion and all of this shit. I couldn't work any of that stuff in because either your damage tanks or you lose some other thing that you just can't give up. And so I would do Occultist Poison Concoction 10 times at league start probably before I would try Fireball again, even if the buff to the hit was they just straight up doubled it across the board. I still don't think it would be good enough. And given the game knowledge that I have now and the amount of currency that I became able to farm on a whim at the end of the league, for example, I went from 0 to a headhunter in about 5 hours. I could have done so much better if my build could A, kill bosses, and B, not die fucking randomly all the time to just shit that you can't identify. In some cases, it may have been because my chaos res was low, etc., etc. But for most of the league, when I was just farming, my resists were capped, chaos res was positive, I had 20k armor. Sometimes when I was leveling, I would even switch over some of my ascendancy passives to get the Aegis, the defensive Aegis that Elementalist has. None of that stuff made the build feel any better, made me a little bit more survivable, but your damage tanks, as I said. And so, literally on the last day of the league, I did one last round of Cyrus, and it was just brutal. It was still just brutal. Because anytime you make even the slightest mistake, you're dead. You're just dead. So you're basically going to be playing a glass cannon build that doesn't have glass cannon damage. And so that's my verdict. At the end of the day, I just don't think the build is going to perform in a way that I feel comfortable, telling people, yeah, this is great, you should try it. Because it's not. I don't think it's going to work out. And as a final note, when I came back into Standard here, I went ahead and threw on Legacy, Bottled Faith, Legacy, Dying Sun, doesn't matter, build still sucks. As I said, I've got the Headhunter now. Headhunter's fun. Headhunter's fun on almost any build. This build still sucks. I don't think that there's anything I can do to make this build better than it currently is, and it's not good enough. And so ultimately it's on you. If you're listening to me and going, you look at my tooltip and you think 30% more of that and I'm good to go, then good luck. But if my experience in the last 3 months was any indication, just play the trap build, or poisonous concoction, or something that is good and reliable and that we know has led people in the past to early kills of important bosses. And you're going to need that, because this is clearly an expansion where bossing is going to be more important, at least at the beginning, I think, for any player than it was in the last league. And it's also possible that just general speed mapping in the way that this build excels at may not be as effective of a strategy as we move into the middle of 3.17. And if that happens, you're fucked. Because this is not, you're not gonna just like, oh, I'll just switch some shit around so that now I can kill the Exarch or whatever the new boss is named. That's not gonna happen. And by that point in the league, I don't know about you, but I'm typically a, one character a league, maybe two type player. And normally if I'm going to play a second build, I start it week 2. And so if you find yourself just trying to push it, getting into the middle of 3.17, it might be too late at that point for you to switch over and have the success that you want to have in the league. And I want to make sure that anybody that's listening to me is not being crippled by having watched a video that I made, saw that the Fireball build looked cool, and then thought, I'm going to blast this out in 3.17 and trash it, make a mirror. It ain't going to happen. I think at the end of the day, GGG is not willing or able or whatever. They're not addressing the issues that bow builds and hand-casted spell builds have in a way that is actually going to make those builds better. All they have done is changed a few numeric values that may or may not make some difference, but I'm putting my money on that it's not going to be enough of a difference to make these builds worth playing, at least at the beginning of the league. And I'm rambling at this point, so that is probably my last video before the new league. I have no idea what build I'm going to be playing. Probably Occultist Poisonous Concoction or RF Inquisitor, but we will see what new information comes out over the next day or so. And with that, I hope that you have all the success in the world in 3.17. I hope that whatever build you do end up picking turns out to be the absolute crusher. and I hope to see you in the next video. Do hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, do all that stuff, and I appreciate you.